Nikki Llewellyn Gregory here from the People Forward Network, excited to introduce our partner and friend, your host of the People Strategy Podcast, Traci Austin. Traci is the Chief Strategy Officer at Elevated Talent Consulting and is breaking down a hot topic for us today that will help us advance our people strategy, ultimately the engagement of our people and their performance. Here's Traci.
Welcome to the People Strategy Podcast. Today, we're talking about something really fun. What our employees really want. So often, what we hear from our employees is not necessarily a request, it's a complaint. And I will tell you, I spent some time this week at an iLandscape conference, and it was phenomenal to really sit with and work with business owners on, hey, how do we create an environment for our team who's doing amazing work in our communities to really be fulfilled in their work? And one of the things that these business owners are struggling with is how do we attract and retain the best staff for our team? So often, what we hear is all of the complaints. We hear all of the things that aren't going well and why they're not going well, but we don't always hear the things that are going well. You know, as a society, we have been conditioned almost to complain, and sometimes we are even rewarded for our complaints. You know, our brain goes so much faster to complaints than it does to what we actually want. So sometimes we have to figure out what we want by first figuring out what we don't want. And same with our team. For our team, sometimes we need to listen into what are all the complaints that are there to really figure out what is it that our staff are actually asking of us that we can do something about. And does this shift the culture? Yes, it completely shifts the culture because what we're starting to do is we're starting to listen into what's needed and create some opportunities for solutions that is on them versus on us. So, the first thing I want to do today is share a little bit of a formula, so to say, around complaints and how we can think about it. And then I'm going to share some coaching that I have done with a client where we really looked at employees that were constantly creating a revolving door of entry into the manager's office, throwing things on their desk and leaving. Guess what? It doesn't work. So we had to change that culture and we had to create some personal responsibility back to that specific employee. But guess what? The manager had to step in and start acting differently, especially around what they were expecting from their team and setting new guidelines and boundaries around that. So, with that, what is a complaint? So, the first thing I love to ask folks to do is to list out all of the complaints that they have about their staff. And I did this week in a seminar with, I think we had about 100 people in the room. And so the question really was, what are all of the complaints about your staff? The complaints ranged from, you're not paying me enough. I don't have enough time to get everything done. My staff are complaining about other team members and they're not taking responsibility for what they're doing. My staff is not completing everything that's on their list. They're getting 80% of the way done and then they're leaving it, right? There's not enough time in the day for me to do everything. Another complaint was I'm expected to do everything and I can't get my team to do what I need them to do. And so I hope that this jogs your kind of thoughts as you're sitting here thinking about what are the complaints that you have? Because guess what? Under every single complaint is some sort of desire. So if we think about, I don't have enough time as a complaint, what is the desire underneath that complaint? The desire is that maybe I have some ease and flow in my workday where I have an opportunity to really do some of the work that's most important to me to be creative in what I'm doing. That could be my desire. And then the next question is, well, what requests do you have to get the desire met so you stop complaining, right? So then that request may be, hey, I'm going to work with my team to ensure that we're not scheduling things at X periods of time so I have the time to do that work. And then my commitment is also to never schedule anything at those times. So that's an example. Let's look at a couple other examples. One example that we get, or that we had this week was my employees constantly come into my office complaining about other employees. So great. What do you want out of that? Like, what is your desire? And the response was, well, I don't want them to complain about other employees. My question was, is that a reasonable request that they're not complaining about other employees? Because there is a time and a place where sometimes things do need to come forward. So when we think about our culture, what are the unintended consequences of some of the questions that we ask? So if we say, I never want them to complain about another employee, is that really what we want? What we found out is that wasn't exactly what they wanted. What they wanted was there were certain things about other staff that they definitely wanted brought forward, and there was other things that they wanted them to handle themselves. Said, okay, so what is the definition of what is worthy of bringing forward and what is not to you, so that we can start to create the separation between that and to create some clear guidelines around, hey, these things are okay. And these things, guess what? I'm giving you the permission to go handle them on your own. And here's potentially ways that we could do that. And I'm going to ask you first, how do you want to solve those things? Because the other desire that this manager had was that his employees would be self sufficient enough to handle many of the complaints that they had about their colleagues on their own and not bring them to him. So, if his desire is, hey, they're creating and they're solving their problems on their own, what is the request that that manager needed to have? So, the request was, we need to have the employees start to think through how they want to solve this and what is applicable for them to solve. So it's requesting back to the employee and saying, well, what would the outcome that you would want be? It's a great question. What would the outcome that you would want to be in this situation? Now that we've asked that, we didn't just give them an answer of how we would solve it. Because when we can take ourselves out of being the one who knows everything, we stop being the bottleneck. We also stop being so important. So when we stop being so important, we in turn make our employees incredibly important because we make them self sufficient and we give them permission to start to solve their own problems. So the request that he had was, how would you solve that problem? Is there any barriers that you have from solving this with a team member? And then they would start to list out what the barriers are. And he would start to help them to determine, is that really a barrier or isn't it a barrier? And then what is their personal commitment? And what is your personal commitment as the manager to that employee and to your organization as a whole? So the employee may walk away from that and say, hey, I'm committed to really starting to figure this out. And maybe there's some things that really aren't that big of a deal that I can just let go. And maybe there's others that really are a big deal that if I have a conversation and understand where they're coming from, we can actually move some things forward. And the manager saying, hey, I'm going to commit to just checking in with you to see what you need from me as far as asking you questions for you to come up with some of your own answers until you're comfortable with it. I'm giving you permission to go ahead and do that. So that's an example of, you know, essentially, hey, if there's a complaint, what comes after that? So underneath every complaint is a desire. Underneath every desire, once we figure out what it is that we actually want, we can make a request. And once we make a request, what is our commitment to ensuring that that thing never becomes a complaint again? And let me name something here. We can't control other people, but what we can control is we can control how we respond to any situation that shows up. And when we can respond to any situation that shows up with curiosity and with this mindset of, I'm committed to my team growing, how do I get out of the way so that they can be successful? That allows them to up level in a pretty significant way. So let's talk about another complaint that came up from these business owners. I can't find any good people that want to do manual labor. I said, okay. So tell me a little bit about what you do want. Like, what is your desire? Well, I am looking for an operations manager. I am looking for a crew lead, and I'm looking for 3 or 4 folks that can come in as general laborers working, inside of our landscape business, whether that is doing construction or whether that's doing maintenance. I said, okay, so what exactly do you need from these folks when they come in? So we've got four different types of positions. Where are you going to find them? Well, but there's no good people out there, Tracy. And I said, okay, so if your thought is there's no good people out there, do you think you're ever going to find a good person? Because our brain stops looking when we say there's no good people. So think about that for a minute. What is your thought around the complaint? Because sometimes the complaint actually stops us from looking any further to get the thing that we actually desire, which is to hire good people in these four different roles. So what's a different thought that you could potentially think? He goes, well, I could think that there are good people out there. I just have to find them. I said, amazing. When you think there's good people out there, I just have to find them. Do you feel like now there's a possibility of actually finding good people? The response was yes. There is now. I feel like there's absolutely good people that I can find now. I said, amazing. So note in our complaint, many times we're stopping ourselves from getting what we want just by the way we're thinking about it. There's no good people to hire versus there's good people out there. I just have to find them. Now there's good people out there. I just have to find them. Now I can get curious around where do I go find them? So we had four different people we were looking for, right? Or types of people. We had, our laborers, our crew folks, both on, the maintenance side and on the construction side. We had a crew leader role, and then we had an operations manager role. I said, well, let's start with operations manager. Where do you think you could find your operations manager? And the response was, I actually might have some people inside my organization that could potentially jump into that role if I gave them the right training and the right tools in order to be successful with very clearly knowing what winning looks like in that role. I said, great. What type of exposure do you need to give them to all parts of the business for them to be successful there? And what is their natural behaviors with what you're doing in order to step into those roles? All right, so now one of four, we think we can find that internally. What about the crew lead? Do you have any current line level staff that are your general laborers that have the capacity and have some natural leadership skills to step into the crew leader role? The response was, well, I don't know. I've actually never looked at them through that lens. I said, okay. We can use people data to tell us who, our natural leaders are of leading a team versus our leaders are leading through the team. We can take a look at it that way. It was, yeah, let's take a look at it that way and see, because now that you mention it and I'm thinking about it, there's actually two people that I'm thinking about. I said, okay, so out of the four roles we're looking for, with there's no good people out there, we think we probably have two internally that we can promote from within, meaning we're going to be able to retain them. I was like, yeah, I think so. Now let's look at our labor positions. Where are we going to find them at? It goes, well, I don't know. I don't know where to go find them. I said, well, where have you found them in the past? Well, in the past, we've done many different things. We've done some H-1B visa programs. We have worked with some of our local programming on, work release programs. We have worked with our employees on referral bonuses. We've posted ads out there. So those are the things we've done. I said, great. What has given you the best results? So I don't know. I said, okay, our data is going to really tell us what gives us our best results. So, what the data tells us about finding our best people is that it really is through those referrals. And so now that we've shifted our mindset to really say, hey, there's good people out there, I just need to find them, it's really setting ourselves up now for showcasing why we are a great place to work. And at this point in, our episode today, as we talk about really looking at those complaints and saying what is underneath those complaints that really allows us to say, what is it that I really want? How do we go about getting it? And then what are we specifically committed to? We can start to completely shift our culture. With that, I want to also share with you a coaching story of how, I was personally able to shift from allowing everything to come on, as far as all those complaints and kind of get thrown on my desk, to really empowering our staff to really think about these things and shifting the culture from a culture of complaint and dump into a culture of ownership, and one where we're really listening into what is important to each person. So I had a little hour timer on my desk when I was in house as an HR manager, and I've coached so many managers on this. And that was essentially to say, hey, look, I definitely want to ensure that you have a place to share things and that we absolutely have that space, where we can have those conversations, because it's not always out on the production floor. It's not always out in the field. So that importance of having that space and that environment where we're truly sharing and holding that presence for our team. However, it can be misused. And so we need to create some boundaries around, hey, what is it that is your responsibility when you complain that we're going to go ahead and get a result? Because dumping it on my desk is not an answer. And so essentially, I kind of started with this little 10-minute timer to essentially say, hey, you can come in, you can complain, you can vent, you can dump all the things. The rule is you have to walk out with one solution that you are going to put into place. And I want you to come in with at least an idea of that solution, because I'm not going to give you the answer. And so what ends up happening, especially with what we've just talked about with these, employee complaints, we kind of chatted a little bit about it with the employee that's saying, hey, I'm frustrated with XYZ team member. All right. So you're frustrated. Why? Well, I'm frustrated because they never clean up the shop. And every time I go into the shop, I can't find the tools that I need. The tools are broken. Half the time they're, in this guy's tool belt or in his bucket. And it's making it so I can't do my job. I'm like, that's a great complaint, right? So what do you want to do about it? Well, I want him to start putting things away. I said, okay, how are you going to do that? And when we think back on this, I want you to think about what's in it for them. So, this employee walked into our office saying, hey, solve this for me. And if we're going to start to ask them to enroll a team member in something, we need to be able to address what's in it for them in order to do it. And how can we also support that? So many times there's an and both solution to what we're going to give our employees permission to go ask of others and to own as far as results and processes. And there's things that as an organization, when we're shifting cultures, we have to own at our level. So in this situation, there's two things going on. One, this employee is frustrated because he can't do his job because he doesn't have the tools to do it. We don't know the story of that other person, and it could be very viable, right? We can have an and both and still need to create a solution. The other part of this is there accountability or agreements from the leadership of this department that says our expectation is that at the end of every shift, the shop looks like this? If that's not there, we're going to have breakdowns in communication all the way through. So, in this very specific situation, when this employee came in and said, hey, complaining about, Bob, because Bob wasn't putting his tools away. And I asked him what he really wants. And he says, I want to be able to do my job and I want to be able to have the tools to do it. And I don't want to have to be cleaning up after Bob all the time. How do you think we can solve that? And his response was, I don't think Bob will ever change. I said, okay. Have you seen Bob change in the past with different things that have come up? Well, yeah. Yeah, actually, I have. And I said, okay, why did Bob actually change? He goes, well, Bob changed because he saw the impact that it was having on the team and he actually valued the relationship with us, but it took a while. I said, okay, well, what did it take? He goes, well, it took him getting what he wanted for him to give us what we wanted. I said, okay, well, what does Bob want? You know? So as we walk through this conversation about what each person wants, we then want to bring folks together to have those conversations to solve it. The more they can solve on their own without our, specific support in the conversations, the more they're going to be able to problem solve and critical think on their own, which is always a win. And in this situation, when Bob walked out, Bob essentially said, or this individual said, "Hey, I'm going to go out and have this conversation with Bob." I said, "Great. And here's what we're going to do." I said, "I'm going to, have a conversation with the manager, but I would actually like you and the manager to have this conversation. If you want me to be present, I can, but I prefer that the two of you had the conversation yourselves." He goes, "Actually, I can do that." I said, "Great. Tell you what, here's what I will do. Why don't you pop back in next week? I'm available at this time, and let me know what else you need from me. Otherwise, do you think that you've got this situation handled?" He goes, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Great." The following week, he popped in. I said, "What do you need?" He goes, "Nothing. I'm good." I said, "Did you get it handled?" He goes, "I did." I said, "Okay." So that was the end of that conversation. Granted, there were more, as there always are. Yet, when we truly think through and say, all right, every complaint is just a poorly worded request. What is the desire behind that complaint? What are those opportunities? And then what is the request that we have? And what is our commitment to that? When we can follow those kind of 4 steps to a complaint, we're able to get underneath the frustration that's happening and really have folks feel heard for what they are bringing forward. So, as we go to close our podcast today, I really want you to think about how you can inspire your employees to really create an environment that they love working in. And the reason why I say that is from a recruitment standpoint, which we'll go back to. That's one of the biggest complaints that I hear is we can't find folks, is why would folks want to work for you? So, if we change the question and we already have built out an employee value proposition for why your employees do want to work for you and the type of employees that you want to work for you, guess what? Now, all of a sudden, we're only opening our doors to the employees that we want. And we're starting to utilize our referral programs and our employees referring folks in that they want to work with to help us find those key employees. So, with that, thank you so much for joining us for this week's People Strategy podcast, and have a fantastic rest of your week. And if you are interested in more, we are offering our People Strategy Roadmap webinar once a month, and you can find that in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn at Traci, Traci Austin, and at our website at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. If you'd love to learn more about our process, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening and sharing your feedback with us through a review. Have a fantastic day.